As we close in on the final episode, Creature Commandos just does not let up in its quality. In this video, I'll be breaking down everything we learned from and then reviewing the penultimate episode of the first season of Creature Commandos, episode 6, titled Priyatel Skelet, which translates from Bulgarian to skeleton friend. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, helping get to my new goal of 150,000 subscribers, and let's begin. To start things off, everything we learned about the DCU from this episode. This episode sees the debut of the DC Universe's most famous fictional location, Gotham City, and a lot of it takes place in Gotham. First of all, we see Gotham for the first time with this version being very grimy and green, and with the classic Gotham City gargoyles. This episode also debuts the Gotham City crime boss, Rupert Thorne, but also kills him off. Rupert in the comics is a corrupt politician responsible for the creation of Dr. Phosphorus. The DCU Rupert Thorne also takes inspiration from his role in Batman the Animated Series, where he was also a crime boss and also was responsible for the creation of a villain. There it was Two-Face. As it turns out, Dr. Phosphorus himself was also a crime boss, at least for a bit, directly upgrading from Rupert Thorne's more grounded organization into a more fantastical, superpowered crime boss, with an organization that models itself after him. Phosphorus isn't much of a crime boss character in the comics. In fact, shots like this remind me more of Black Mask. Not that that matters in the least, though. In Phosphorus's backstory, the fictional Middle Eastern country of Bialia is mentioned, confirming its existence in this world. It's also confirmed to be a fascist dictatorship, likely under the rule of either Ruman Harjavti or maybe even Queen Bee. Or both. As Phosphorus goes to kill Thorne, we see the guard reading a nudie mag of women dressed like superheroes or villains. Two of them seem to be maybe parodies of Marvel heroes like Iceman, and much more obviously is Daredevil, both of whom could maybe be fictional characters in this world, as Marvel is typically in the DC universe and vice versa. The other two, however, seem to be based off of actual DC characters like the Riddler and Star Sapphire. Riddler's existence we could have assumed because if Batman exists, then Riddler probably does as well. He was also mentioned in Peacemaker Season 1, but we don't know if that reference is canon or not. Star Sapphire is also not exactly surprising, given that Hal Jordan will be very experienced in this world in 2026. His whole supporting cast and Rogues Gallery likely are as well, so Carol Ferris is likely in her 50s and likely has been Star Sapphire for a long while. But obviously what we've all been waiting for is the appearance of the Batman, exactly as I'd hoped, as a shadowy figure cameo setting up Dr. Phosphorus's defeat and capture. This is technically Batman's second appearance and second cameo, but seeing as the first was in what is likely just a vision of a fake future, this can also be considered his actual DCU debut. It is just a silhouette, so it's impossible to make out his design, and everything is lit blue, so we can't tell the color scheme either, but it does look like he has the whited out eyes, medium-sized ears, a relatively large belt, boots that end in thick black lines, and a generally very bulky build. This takes place in the past, so it doesn't necessarily mean anything for how Batman will look in, say, Batman the Brave and the Bold, but it definitely could mean something for his, at this point, hypothetical appearance in Clayface. There is still some doubt as to whether the Batman franchise will be integrated into the DCU. This neither confirms nor denies in any way, but Batman definitely does look a lot bulkier here than Pattinson Batman. I'll get to my opinion on all of this in the review section of the video, but that actually begins right now. This episode starts off strong by dropping us right into Gotham and making it clear within just a few seconds this is Gotham City. There's the gargoyle, the grime and dirty look, and the very Batman the Animated Series sounding background music. This is the beginning of Dr. Phosphorus's backstory, another superb character and world builder like most of the backstories of the season were, focusing on the most visually interesting member. Up until now though, while he was definitely the most visually interesting, he wasn't a character who had much depth to him. This episode gives him the depth that he desperately needed. The backstory is dark and depressing and really brutal, showing how a once good man could be turned by tragedy. The story has a great villain in Rupert Thorne who comes off as appropriately maniacally evil, killing Alex's wife and daughter, framing him for their murder, and then atomizing him, which by the way is a great looking scene, but you'd also expect all of that to lead into a satisfying comeuppance when Phosphorus gets his revenge. But the story does not focus on that, at least not in that way, as Thorne's death is off-screen and treated as a tragedy in and of itself, as Phosphorus also killed his wife and kids. Again, brutal, but right at home in a Gotham City villain origin story. The following montage is also fantastic, showing Phosphorus' quick descent into villainy, Batman villain theatrics, and brutal killings like melting that guy's ankles to make him fall to his death. I mean, god damn. The dancing was even fun, which is weird because the dancing in the very recent season of What If was really hard to watch, like so cringy. There's just something about a Gotham City based gang with a gimmick that fits something like like this so well. In last week's video, I mentioned how, seeing as this will take place in Gotham and Phosphorus is a Batman villain, we might see Batman himself, and lo and behold, we did. Batman cameos in a fantastic moment, being a glimpse of exactly what I've always wanted to see in every Batman villain-focused project, and I hope we see more of it in Clayface. Batman from the villain's perspective. A shadowy silhouette figure that seems otherworldly and feels like a final boss. The way they did it here is exactly how I've always pictured it, but in a really small scale. I mean, the lights turn off, Phosphorus looks up, and we see Batman's silhouette in front of a bolt of lightning in the night sky. It's badass, and the perfect ending to the flashbacks. Gunn did say that the animators actually put in more of Batman that he had to cut because he didn't want to commit to a design and probably other aspects of Batman, which makes sense, and I have no complaints here. In fact, I might prefer this. I mean, the fact that Batman just shows up and then could just infer that he defeated Phosphorus, someone capable of taking on a tank, makes Batman feel as badass as he possibly could. Same with how Clayface was able to take on Flag very easily while also overpowering Frankenstein at the same time. This version of Batman is clearly on another level compared to other live-action versions. He's a man who goes toe-to-toe with and regularly defeats powerful metas, characters who are not even considered his biggest foes like Dr. Phosphorus and Clayface, earning his place among the Justice League. In the present, Phosphorus' scenes cut together with the past to make for a very unsettling and tense little story from which the title of the episode is derived. It's tense because the episode deliberately leaves you guessing for a while as to whether or not Phosphorus would kill that kid. Thankfully he didn't. I think that would have been just way too brutal and unnecessary, but the fact that it was a possibility and how scary the episode made Phosphorus definitely added to that intensity. Then, while Phosphorus is the main character of the episode and the what it's named after, this episode really impressed me with how well it managed to juggle the large cast of characters and their separate storylines, with how short these episodes are, especially with how it then all brought it all together. Flag and Frankenstein get 2 scenes each, both in the beginning and at the end, but that feels entirely warranted given their focus in the previous episode. Even still, it's not nothing. Flag is confirmed to be alive, but in a coma. A more simple explanation for his future appearances than I was expecting, but I prefer it this way. Frankenstein apparently brought Flag to the hospital, which feels a bit out of character, but also, I don't know, maybe not. He does see Flag as his best friend. What seems very in character is Frankenstein's scene on the plane, where he, like always, comes off as a violent, love-struck, funny, and at times poetic psychopath. I mean, Eric Frankenstein has got to be one of the most unique characters that Gunn has ever written, which is saying a lot, and certainly one that I ended up being a lot more interested in and invested in than I was expected. He's entertaining, but also horrifying, which is kind of crazy. Meanwhile, Weasel goes off to bond with some wolves. Along the way, we're shown his care for the little girl in the flashback episode has morphed into care for the very similar looking Ilana Rostovic, something that a few comments on my episode 4 review called, so kudos to you whoever called that. The story was sweet and really nice, but I'm assuming is mostly there just to set up Weasel turning on the Commandos to save Ilana. I'm hoping it also sets up the wolves coming to fight by his side in the finale, otherwise their inclusion would mostly be for nothing. The major side story, however, focused on the bride and Nina Mazursky and gave both characters some much needed moments of personality and dialogue that I feel like neither have really received since around maybe episode 2. That, alongside the character interactions between Nina and the bride, as well as the brutal action scenes that came out of this, were all really great. The only thing that I didn't love was the setting, as honestly the horniness of the show can feel a little bit gratuitous at times. It could be a bit much. Otherwise though, it's a great story. Finally, the storylines all collide in the last few minutes, which felt like the perfect ending to the penultimate episode. Frankenstein arrives in Pakolistan, setting up his reunion with the bride. Waller begs Flag to wake up as his information could change the course of history, and the Commandos all come together to walk up to the castle as an absolutely perfectly fitting song plays in the background. This is how you set up a finale. Man, did this get me hyped for the next episode, and man, did it successfully bring together a string of separate stories that the episode already did a great job of separately telling. In my opinion, this episode is fantastic, telling us one of the better backstories of the show, giving us an awesome Batman cameo, masterfully juggling multiple different stories, and perfectly bringing them all together, while giving characters like Phosphorus, Bride, and Nina the focus that they really needed. This episode is the perfect alley-oop. Now, the finale just needs to score. It's not absolutely perfect, but as of now, is the second best episode of the season, deserving of a 9 out of 10. Now, I don't actually have anything to say about the trailer of the next episode, so instead, I'll quickly discuss some of the DCU news that recently came out. For instance, Jason Momoa has been confirmed to be cast as Lobo and is appearing in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Neither the casting or his appearance in that movie is exactly surprising to me. Momoa as Lobo was practically confirmed in the past, and Supergirl definitely feels like the perfect place for him to appear, but also this is perfect casting, far more fitting a role for him than Aquaman, and I'm excited to see what they do with Lobo. The other thing is that the Batman Part 2 has been delayed by yet another year. It's the second time it's been delayed by an entire year. Also, not exactly surprising given that we knew the script had yet to be completed as recently as December, but it is still incredibly disappointing. I mean, 5.5 years between movies when the sequel was announced right after the first release is kind of unacceptable in my opinion, and there's almost no justifiable reason why it would take that long to write. The only legitimate reasons is that maybe a rewrite was necessary to fold it into the DCU, or maybe Warner Bros. Discovery really wanted a Penguin Season 2 because of how successful the first season was, and so Matt Reeves had to make changes to the script to allow for that. I don't know, if the only reason is that Reeves is just a slow writer, then I think it'd be a mistake to bring him back for the third movie. Regardless, let me know your thoughts on everything I talked about in this video, the Lobo casting, the Batman Part 2 delay, as well as the 6th episode of Creature Commandos.